Hey everyone, Shark here bringing you a guide on the dramatic and extremely broken Hydro Archon, Furina. We'll be reviewing her kits, weapons, constellations, and more. We'll talk about her best builds, stat goals, and her best teams. There's a lot to talk about, so make sure you boop that like button so you can gain the blessing of Shark luck to win your next 50-50, and now that you've done that, we can begin. Furina is a 5-star Hydro Sword user that puts the super in support. She is an off-field damage dealer that summons permanent, indestructible sea creatures to fight your enemies while also buffing your team to insane levels, nearly doubling their damage. And yes, this is all at Constellation 0. So to go over exactly how she does that, we'll dive into her kit and discover why she is one of the best characters in all of Genshin Impact. The first thing to know about Furina is that her kit is based around HP and its fluctuations. Furina's damage from her elemental skill and burst scale off her max HP, so the higher your maximum HP, the more damage you'll deal. And she's also a bit of a drama queen, because she loves when your team's HP changes, providing stronger buffs the more widely your team's HP goes up or down over a short period of time. Furina's elemental skill is like having several abilities in one, but both versions of her skill have a 20-second cooldown, but a 30-second duration, allowing them to be kept up permanently. The default version of her skill is the Salon Solitaire, and it's the one that you'll use the most. In this version of the skill, Furina summons 3 sea creature attendants to deal hydro damage to your foes based on her max HP. The Crab Maid deals the most damage, but attacks slowly. The Seahorse Handmaiden attacks the fastest, but deals the least damage, and the Gentleman Octopus is in the middle. These 3 Salon members also drain HP from your entire team when they attack, which in turn increases the damage they deal by up to 40%. Luckily, these noble sea creatures will not kill your team because they stop draining your party's health when they are at or under 50% HP. The Summon Salon members also have a pretty good range, and they can even hit difficult flying enemies with ease. Furina can also completely change her elemental skill by using a charged attack. The other version of her skill summons the Singer of Many Waters. This is a stationary summon that heals your active character over time about once every 2 seconds. This summon does not attack enemies, it deals no damage, it doesn't apply any hydro, or make any elemental particles. You cannot have this healing pet summoned at the same time as the Salon members, so this healing summon is not normally used in the heat of combat, but it is nice in the overworld and when you have a few extra seconds to heal your team. Furina's skill is also unique because it has the properties of both Arca, Numa, and Uja. The Salon Solitaire version is Uja aligned and her default Arca alignment. When Furina uses a normal attack in this state, she'll trigger an extra Uja aligned attack, which is the Dark Purple Sword. When she switches stances, her alignment changes to Numa, and when she uses a normal attack in this state, she'll trigger an extra Numa attack, which is the Light Aligned Yellow Sword. Having both Arca alignments is really convenient for Furina for overworld puzzles, but it's also useful in combat because Furina can do things like use her Uja aligned Dark Sword attack to instantly break the Coppelius' Cryo Shield. Furina's Elemental Burst deals AoE hydro damage based on her max HP, but it has a second, absurdly broken effect. Her burst gives your entire team a damage and healing bonus based on her special mechanic called Fanfare. Whenever any party member loses or gains HP, Furina will gain 1 stack of Fanfare for every % of their max HP that they lost or gained. So if all of your party members lost 40% of their maximum HP, Furina will gain 160 Fanfare stacks. And if you then heal everyone in your party by 30% of their max HP, Furina will gain another 120 Fanfare stacks, for a total of 280 Fanfare stacks from the HP loss and then subsequent heal. This is perfect because the default form of her elemental skill will summon her little oceanic attendants to attack, draining your entire team's HP, and thereby giving her great synergy with her elemental burst. This also makes characters with front-loaded, team-wide healing highly valuable on Furina's teams, as they can allow Furina's burst to gain a high amount of fanfare early on. However, it does not make single-target healers like Bennett and Kuki Shinobu unusable with Furina, they just cannot stack the buffs as quickly. But as the burst lasts for 18 seconds, you have plenty of time to get the maximum amount of fanfare. Just note that you can cast her elemental burst while your current burst is already active, and doing so will reset the stacks of fanfare and all accumulated bonuses. At Constellation 0, Furina's maximum fanfare stack limit is 300, which means that at talent level 10, with max fanfare stacks, she provides an absurd 75% damage bonus and 30% healing bonus for your entire team. This is completely bonkers, but it's important to note that this damage bonus does not affect transformative reactions like Hyper Bloom, because those reactions do not scale with damage percent bonuses at all. Furina's first Ascension passive is a nice way to get some extra healing when another party member overheals. This passive helps mitigate some of the HP loss from her elemental skill, but it also makes single target healers like Kuki Shinobu a little bit easier to use. This passive is especially useful when paired with characters that heal themselves like Nouvelette, because it helps generate her fanfare stacks even faster. Furina's Ascension 4 passive enhances her elemental skill. It increases the damage her skill does based on her max HP, and when you're in the Singer of Many Waters healing stance, it will allow her to heal faster based on your max HP. This passive is a nice little buff for Furina's damage. The bonuses cap out at 40,000 HP, so you want to be as close to that number as possible. This is also why an HP percent goblet is often much better than a hydro damage goblet, but we'll talk more about that in the character build and stat goals section. Furina's Exploration and Utility passive reduces the cooldowns of the Fontamer Aberrant attacks, and this is nice for underwater fights, but not really useful anywhere else. Next we'll go over Furina's Constellations, which are pretty broken, but honestly not necessary at all as she's already such a good character at Constellation 0. Her first constellation increases her fanfare stack limit to 400 and immediately gives you 150 stacks when you use her burst. This means that as soon as you use her elemental burst, you'll immediately have a 37.5% damage increase and a 15% healing bonus increase for your entire team, and these bonuses will only increase over time. And I know this seems like a massive upgrade, but really it's only about a 12% increase in damage over a 20-second rotation. However, the extra healing bonus and immediate fanfare stacks do make it a lot easier to use Furina with single target healers like Bennett or Kuki Shinobu. Furina's second constellation, on the other hand, is a massive damage spike. Furina's Constellation 2 multiplies the amount of fanfare stacks you gain by 3.5 times. This makes her max out her fanfare stacks extremely quickly, especially considering the bonus fanfare from her Constellation 1. This constellation also gives Furina the ability to overcap on fanfare stacks, and by doing so she increases her maximum HP and therefore damage. And this constellation makes that really easy, because overall, this constellation increases Furina's personal damage by more than 42% in a 20-second rotation compared to her C1, and it increases her personal damage by nearly 60% compared to C0. Furina's Constellation 3 increases her elemental burst level by 3, which is nice, but overall it's only about a 7% damage increase over her C2. Furina's Constellation 4 is a nice utility buff that significantly reduces her energy recharge requirements, which can be quite high as we'll talk about later. This constellation can grant her up to 16 energy in a 20-second rotation, which can reduce the amount of energy recharge she needs by anywhere between 40 and 60%. This allows her to use more HP and crit-oriented weapons and artifacts, but this constellation is still only about a 12% increase over her C3, so it's not really massive. Furina's Constellation 5 increases her skill level by 3. This is about a 17% increase in personal damage over her C4, as it's essentially where all of her damage comes from. Furina's Constellation 6 reads like a small novel, but it does give a dramatic increase in damage, which is to be expected of a limited 5 stars final constellation. Her Constellation 6 gives her a Hydro Infusion for up to 6 normal, charged, and plunging attacks. These attacks deal damage based off of 18% of her max HP, and allow her to deal massive damage for just a few hits. It also makes it so both versions of her elemental skill will drain your HP and also restore your HP at the same time. When you use Furina's default elemental skill, your ensemble of oceanic attacking attendants will still drain your team's HP, but they will also heal your team whenever Furina does a normal attack. Using all 6 normal attacks from this constellation will heal your team by 60% of Furina's max HP over 15 seconds, and this is before considering any healing bonuses. Because this heal is based off Furina's max HP, she almost guarantees that everyone on the team will be healed to full, and it becomes really easy to play Furina without any healer at all. You can also switch stances in her C6, and in doing so, Furina's hits will deal much higher damage than when in the Uja Aligned's triple pet stance. However, instead of healing, each hit will drain 1% of each team member's current HP. But the Singer of Many Waters will be active during the stance, so you'll still get a good amount of healing, at least for the active character. It's important to note that the buff from her Constellation 6 is only lowered when an attack successfully connects with an enemy, and it doesn't matter how many enemies are hit at once. Furina's final constellation is a 25% increase in personal damage over her C5, and a massive 190% increase in personal damage over her Constellation 0. But again, you don't need any constellations for Furina to be great. However, if you are considering going for her signature weapon or for constellations, go for her constellations, because they end up making much more of a difference for her and your team, as we'll see in just a moment when we talk about her best builds. Furina is so great with so many different characters and in so many different teams, you think there would be a high degree of variability in her builds, but luckily her best build doesn't really change. For talent priority, you want to level her skill and burst at the same time, and you don't need to level her normal attacks at all. They are the only part of her kit that scale off of attack and not max HP, so we don't have to use a single Mora or talent book on them. And because Furina's damage scales off her max HP, I strongly recommend leveling her to the highest level you can to take advantage of her massive base HP stat for even more damage. There is also one stat that is absolutely vital to Furina and it often gets severely overlooked, and that is energy recharge. Furina can be extremely energy hungry and need a ton of energy recharge, like over 250% in some teams, but her energy recharge requirements also vary widely depending on your team's setup. If Furina is the only Hydro character on a team, she'll need around 180% energy recharge or more, but if you pair her with Raiden, she'll only need about 155%. If you're using Furina and another Hydro character like Xingqiu, Yelan, Kokomi, or Neuvillette, you'll want around 150% energy recharge, and if you use Raiden with 2 Hydro characters in a team, you'll only need about 120% energy recharge. Triple Hydro teams vary quite a bit as well, but most of the time you'll be fine with 130% energy recharge, which is even too much for several Triple Hydro teams. And of course, if you have Furina's C4, her elemental recharge requirements drop dramatically, and in almost all cases, she won't need more than 130% energy recharge, which is not too hard to get off of artifact substats. These energy recharge requirements can be confusing, so my best advice is to aim for 180% energy recharge if you want the most versatile Furina for many different types of teams. This may sound like a lot, but it's not too hard even as a free-to-play player. For artifact main stats, you'll want HP percent as your sands, but you can use an energy recharge sands if you need to. If you aren't using an energy recharge weapon, you'll probably need to use an energy recharge sands just to keep Furina's burst up. You'll want to use an HP percent goblet over a hydro damage goblet, unless your Furina is C2, and then an HP goblet and hydro damage goblet are roughly equivalent, so just use whichever one has the better substats. Finally, you'll want to use a crit rate or crit damage circlet, whichever one works best for your specific stat spread. Don't build a 10% crit rate, 300% crit damage Furina, aim for something like a 60% crit rate, 120% crit damage build. You can also use an HP percent circlet, especially if it has better substats, as they only perform slightly worse than crit circlets. The best artifact set for Furina is the 4-piece Golden Troop set by far. It is the best set for her personal damage, and it's also extremely resin efficient to farm, since Furina's HP drain enables any on-field damage dealer to use the 4-piece Marushose Hunter set, which comes from the same domain. However, you can also use any combination of 2-piece Golden Troop, 2-piece Hydro damage, 2-piece HP percent, or 2-piece Emblem of the Severed Fate, or even a 4-piece Tenacity of the Millilith, but these artifact combinations are roughly at 10 to 20% damage loss over a 4-piece Golden Troop set. And if you get her C6, you'll want to use a 4-piece Marushose Hunter set on her. Furina has many weapon options, but honestly most of them just kind of end up being stat sticks, as there are very few weapon passives that she can actually use. And keep in mind that Furina has high energy recharge requirements, so it's often better to use a free-to-play energy recharge weapon like the Fluvson Ferryman over an expensive gacha weapon. Furina's signature weapon, the Splendor of Tranquil Waters, is her best weapon for personal damage, being about a 30% increase over free-to-play options. But keep in mind that you'll probably need to use an energy recharge sands with this sword, as meeting Furina's energy recharge requirements on substats can be quite difficult. Once again, if you are considering pulling for Furina's Constellations or for her signature weapon, always prioritize her Constellations, as her C1 and C2 solve more problems while giving her a significant damage increase. Her next best weapon for personal damage is the Iraku Mitsugiri, which is Chiori's signature sword. This weapon has high crit damage and increases her skill damage, and if one of your team members deals geo damage to an enemy, this sword is about just as strong as Furina's signature weapon. If you don't use a geo character in your Furina teams, this is still one of the strongest weapons for her personal damage. Next on the list is the best free-to-play option for Furina. The Festering Desire is an old event sword from way back in 1.1, and it gives a good amount of energy recharge, elemental skill crit rate, and elemental skill damage percent, all perfect for Furina. Unfortunately, if you don't have it already, you can't obtain it anymore. But those lucky enough to have it should definitely use it, especially if you plan on getting a C0 Furina without getting her signature weapon. Luckily, there is another great free-to-play option that comes from fishing. And yes, I know the PTSD everyone has from fishing for the catch, but this weapon is much easier and much more chill to obtain. You can get the Fluvson Ferryman from fishing in Fontaine, and it's a great free-to-play weapon that provides a lot of energy recharge and elemental skill crit rate, which Furina really appreciates. The energy recharge provided by its passive only lasts for 5 seconds, so it doesn't really help that much. However, the nearly 46% energy recharge provided by the weapon's substat is massive for Furina's energy recharge requirements. I know some people like to use the Battle Pass weapon, the Wolf Fang, on Furina, but it's just okay. It's a nice stat stick for some extra crit rate, as well as some increased elemental skill and burst damage, but Furina isn't on the field long enough to gain much of the additional crit rate buff it provides. It also has the pesky problem of not helping her energy recharge requirements, which is not worth it for about a 5% damage increase over the Fluvson Ferryman. Another great weapon is the Favonius Sword, as it provides more than 60% additional energy recharge for Furina, but it also helps your team's energy needs at the same time. Between the high energy recharge substat on this weapon and the extra particles from the weapon's passive, using the Favonius Sword will almost always give Furina enough energy to use her burst when needed. What's also nice is this sword's low base attack is irrelevant for Furina, since her damage scales exclusively off of her max HP. The Favonius Sword is usually about 10% behind the Floopson Ferryman in terms of Furina's own personal damage, but it is highly valuable for overall team damage and ease of rotations because it's helpful for your entire team's energy requirements and not just Furina's. Now let's talk about her teams and synergies, and there are a lot of them.
Being too popular can be such a hassle.
The most integral part of Furina's teams are a strong healer. You normally want a healer that is capable of quickly healing the entire team at once. Team-wide healers provide a lot of fanfare stacks during Furina's burst, and they also keep the team's HP above 50% to maximize Furina's own personal damage. Some strong team-wide healers include Baizhu for his Dendro healing skill, Yao Yao as a free-to-play Baizhu that's almost just as strong, Charlotte for her massive heal from her elemental burst, Mika as another version of an elemental burst healer that also gives you physical damage and attack speed buffs, Jean as another massive burst healer that also has the ability to use a 4-piece Viridescent set, Sayu as a free-to-play version of Jean, but that's best used at Constellation 1 or higher so you can heal above 70% of a character's maximum HP. And then there's Xian Yun, Cloud Retainer, as a great heal over time option and my personal favorite because she allows you to make anyone Zhao. And there's also Noelle, who is not an off-field healer, but can still heal the entire team while doing a lot of damage with her elemental burst. Other good healers are Bennett, Kokomi, and Kuki Shinobu. Keep in mind that Bennett and Kuki don't have access to team-wide healing, and Kokomi only heals the whole team when she's normal attacking during her elemental burst. For team buffers and supports, Kazuha and Venti are both excellent choices as they can both group up enemies and utilize a 4-piece Viridescent artifact set, which dramatically reduces enemies' elemental resistance. Kazuha provides a bit more offensive buffs due to his Ascension 4 passive granting extra damage percent, while Venti refunds 15 energy to all party members of the element he absorbs with his elemental burst. Other great supports include Xingqiu and Yelan, as you receive a nice 25% HP bonus from Hydro Resonance on top of the great amount of additional off-field Hydro damage and application. Running Xingqiu or Yelan with Furina also reduces the energy requirements needed by both characters, as they can feed each other Hydro Particles and focus a little bit more on building offensive stats. Xiangling is also another great choice for Furina because she applies very fast AoE pyro damage off-field. This allows Xiangling and Furina to vaporize off of each other, increasing the damage for both of them. Zhongli can also be another great choice to pair with Furina. Even though you would prefer using a healer with Furina over a shield character, Zhongli provides universal resistance reduction, which can be further buffed by using a 4-piece Archaic Petrus sets. But the interruption resistance provided by his shield is still quite valuable, especially in a team with Furina and Neuvillette. Next we move on to the on-field damage dealers that pair well with Furina. This section is really short because she works with basically everyone. This is because Furina gives a team-wide buff of damage percent with high uptime. This buff is universal, so it doesn't care about which element or stats a character wants. The only thing it doesn't buff are transformative reactions, so Furina will not make your Hyper Blooms stronger, but she will make the characters in those teams stronger. Even when an on-field damage dealer has something in their kit that seemingly prevents them from using Furina, she still does well. For example, Linny performs best in triple pyro teams, but Furina does not invalidate Linny's teams at all because her Hydro application is actually pretty slow, and it's still possible to keep a pyro aura on the enemies, and if you can't maintain his passive, you can still vaporize with a big damage buff, which will often make up for losing out on that passive ability. So to build a Furina team, all you have to do is pick an on-field damage dealer that you like, then pick a healer, then pick another off-field damage dealer or a utility support, and that's it. She works great in elemental teams as Hydro is an incredibly desired and valuable element, and even if you already have another Hydro character in your team, it's often worth it to take Furina as well. Just note that if you want to run a Hu Tao team with Furina, you'll still need Xingqiu or Yelan because her Hydro application cannot keep up with Hu Tao on her own. Furina also does great in hyper carry teams. Because the damage bonus she gives is not tied to a specific element or stat, it's just extra damage. So even in a team where you don't care about the elemental application, like a team with Wanderer or Zhao, Furina is still an amazing addition. And even if you had no other characters on your account, you could still make a strong team with Furina. Lisa as an on-field Electro driver, with Furina, Dendro Traveler, and Barbara is surprisingly good. Even DPS Barbara with Furina, Xiangling, and Dendro Traveler works quite well. And yes, you heard that right, DPS Barbara actually works well with Furina, so much so that I 36-starred one of the hardest Abyss challenges we've had in a long time with a Barbara Furina team. And the more characters you get, the more valuable Furina becomes, since her buffs are appreciated by just about every character in the game. I think this is really great because a lot of DPS characters unfortunately get left behind as stronger characters are released, but with Furina, that is much less of a problem. Do you love Ayaka or Ganyu, but don't like the State of Freeze teams? Furina makes them much better. Do you like Clorind or Cyno, but are underwhelmed by their damage compared to other limited 5 stars? Furina elevates them to new heights. Do you like older 5 stars, like Klee or Diluc, and wish they were still relevant? Furina makes them feel like they did when they were dominating everything. Did you get a lot of Constellations on a 4-star that everyone says is bad, but you still want to use them? Furina makes characters like Fremine, C6 Dory, and C6 Lynette actually feel like good on-field damage dealers. Furina is just one of the best characters in the game while also being very free-to-play friendly, and I hope this guide has helped you see how beneficial she can be. I love you everyone, make sure to like and sub because you're jawsome, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.